Back in 2010, Elena and Marcus were splitting an $800 rent check on a place with a lime green refrigerator and a dishwasher that only worked if you smacked it twice. They'd graduated from the same program that spring and both landed their first real jobs earning $52,000 a year. Money-wise, nobody could have separated them. Now jump ahead 15 years. Elena just accepted a job she genuinely wanted, even though it paid less, and didn't hesitate for a second. Marcus, meanwhile, is standing in a repair shop parking lot at 2 in the morning, swiping his card to pay for a transmission fix on the matte black truck he financed the month he turned 25. Their paychecks never split apart, not even once. Yet one of them is free, and the other is stuck. It wasn't luck, it wasn't an inheritance, and it wasn't income. It came down to a handful of choices nobody ever warned them about. I'm Yank, and today we're digging into the biggest wealth destroyers of your 20s and 30s, the ones you absolutely need to steer clear of. And that truck. Hang on to that thought, we'll circle back to it. But first, let me be completely upfront about something. I'm not a financial advisor and none of this is financial advice. These are simply patterns I've watched unfold again and again in other people's lives, and yes, uncomfortably, in some of my own too. Here's the mental shift that changes everything. Your 20s and 30s aren't a dress rehearsal. Most people treat these 2 decades like a practice round, the years that don't really count, when you're allowed to be broke and a bit reckless before finally getting serious at 40. That belief is the single costliest misconception in all of personal finance. Because of how compounding functions, the dollars you handle between ages 22 and 40 are the most powerful dollars you'll ever hold. They have the longest runway to grow, so any wealth destroyer that eats them doesn't just cost you that cash, it costs you everything that cash was ever going to turn into. Elena grasped that. Marcus, at least back then, did not. So let's break down what's actually devouring those dollars, starting with the destroyer almost nobody clocks, because it never feels like an error in the moment. It's called lifestyle creep, and it's the wealth killer that sneaks up on you one raise at a time. Here's the mechanism. You land a raise. Great news. And within roughly 2 months, that extra cash has silently vanished into a slightly fancier apartment, a slightly nicer car, the top-tier streaming plan, ordering delivery instead of cooking. Nothing dramatic ever occurs. You didn't blow it all in a casino. Your lifestyle just quietly stretched to absorb the raise, the same way a goldfish grows to match the size of its bowl. This is a big reason the national savings rate recently dropped to about 4%, meaning the typical American is holding on to roughly 4 cents of every dollar earned. 4 cents. People are earning more than at any point in history and banking almost none of it, because every income bump gets swallowed by a spending bump they never consciously chose. Here's what makes this one so quietly vicious. Nobody notices it happening in real time. No bill ever arrives labeled lifestyle creep. But let me show you the actual cost. When Elena and Marcus each got a $10,000 raise at age 30, Marcus did what most people do. His spending absorbed it, and within a month it had disappeared, invisible. Elena instead invested hers, about $830 a month, at a standard 7% return. By the time she retires, that single raise turns into more than $1 million. Same raise, same year. The gap between $1 million and a nicer sofa Marcus doesn't even remember buying. That's the trap. It's not that spending money is bad, it's that a raise feels like a reward you've already earned, when really it's a fork in the road you didn't realize you were standing on. That's destroyer number 1, and it's the quietest of the bunch. Destroyer number 2 is the loudest, and it's the single most dependable way young people torch that fork in the road, the vehicle. Or in Marcus's case, the matte black truck. I've covered cars before and I'll keep covering them, because the numbers somehow keep getting worse. The average new car payment in America now sits around $770 a month. The average used car payment is around $530. More than 1 in 6 people financing a new car are paying over $1,000 monthly. The average new car now costs a little more than $49,000, over 30% higher than before the pandemic. That's a mortgage-sized payment in much of this country, except this house loses a fifth of its value the moment you drive it off the lot. And that's the part that really gets me. A new car sheds about 10% of its value the instant you leave the dealership, and around 20% within the first year alone. You're financing an asset that's outrunning your payments. This is why nearly 30% of people trading in a vehicle right now owe more than it's actually worth, and the average person in that hole is underwater by more than $7,000. So they roll that $7,000 into the next loan, on the next car, which will also lose value. Now the payment tops $900 a month, stretched across 84 months. That's a 7-year loan on a machine that'll be nearly worthless by the time it's paid off. It's a financial hamster wheel, except the hamster is on fire and somehow still keeping up the payments. But here's the figure that should really keep you up at night, and it isn't the $770. It's what that money could have quietly grown into instead. Marcus's truck payment ran about $770. Elena bought a plain, dependable used car with a $300 payment and invested the difference, just the gap, at 8%. Over 30 years, that gap turns into roughly $700,000. That's the real price of Marcus's truck. Not what he handed the dealership, but the money he never got the chance to invest. Cars aren't wealth destroyers because they cost money, everything costs money. They're wealth destroyers because they cost you the enormous thing that money would have become. If the car is what strikes the match, destroyer number 3 is what keeps it burning for years: credit card debt. Americans currently owe somewhere around $1.4 trillion on credit cards, a record high set at the close of last year. The average interest rate on cards carrying a balance now sits near 22%. For comparison, a mortgage runs about 7%, and a car loan around 7.5%. Your credit card charges roughly 3 times what a home loan costs. It's by a wide margin the priciest money most people will ever borrow. And the grim twist is that people are increasingly borrowing it for groceries and gas, not luxuries. Here's how the trap mechanically works. At around 18% interest, a balance you never chip away at roughly doubles in about 4 years. So that $400 purchase becomes $800, and by then you don't even remember buying it. The average balance people carry sits around $6,700. Make only the minimum payment on that, and it takes more than 18 years to clear, costing over $14,000 total. Sit with that for a second. You'd still be paying off tonight's dinner when a kid you haven't even had yet is in high school. That's not a budgeting slip-up, that's a math trap wrapped in friendly-looking plastic. And there's a newer, sneakier version hunting people in their 20s right now: buy now, pay later. Nearly 2/3 of Gen Z has used it, and about a quarter of people now use these little installment plans just to buy groceries split into 4 easy payments. Marcus had 4 of these running simultaneously and couldn't have told you the total to save his life. And he's far from alone. 2/3 of users have several of these loans running at once, a practice the industry sweetly labels loan stacking, and everyone else calls having no idea how much you actually owe. Nearly 40% of users say it makes spending feel less real, like it isn't quite money. It barely shows up on your credit report, and it barely registers in your own head. It's debt wearing a cheerful little costume. Now here's what ties those first 3 together: they're really just symptoms of destroyer number 4, the one that costs the most while hurting the least: waiting. Simply waiting. Quietly telling yourself you'll start investing later, once things settle down, once you earn a bit more, once the debt disappears. And look, I get it, when you're young, later feels free. It costs nothing today. But compounding makes later the single most expensive word in the English language, and I can prove it in about 30 seconds. Elena started investing $500 a month at age 25. At a normal, unglamorous 7% return, she'll have around $1.3 million by 65. Marcus started with the exact same $500 a month, he just waited until 35, once he felt ready. He'll end up with roughly $600,000. Same monthly amount. He only skipped the first 10 years. Those 10 years cost him about $700,000. He didn't invest half as much as Elena, he invested almost exactly the same amount, he just started the clock a decade late, and it turns out the clock was the entire game the whole time. Compounding is the one place in life where showing up early and then coasting beats showing up late and hustling. And it gets worse, because a lot of you are being handed free money right now and turning it down without even realizing it. Roughly 1 in 4 people with a 401k don't contribute enough to capture their full employer match. That match is free money. It's a guaranteed, instant 50 to 100% return, something that doesn't exist anywhere else in the known financial universe. Your bank will never phone you offering to double your deposit, but your employer literally is, and a quarter of people let that call go to voicemail. Usually you only need to contribute around 5% to capture the whole match. The average person leaving it on the table walks away from roughly $3,000 a year, and invested across a career that ignored free money alone is worth around $300,000. And here's where the median really matters, because the average retirement balance makes things look okay. The median household under 35 has less than $20,000 saved. Half of them have even less than that. This was never a story about rich versus poor. It's a story about early versus late. So you might be thinking, okay, Yank, I'll just dump every dollar I have into the market and keep zero cash on hand. And that's destroyer number 5, coming at you from the opposite direction, having no emergency fund. Here's precisely what happens without one. Life sends you a bill you didn't plan for, a car repair, an ER visit, a water heater that dies during the worst possible week. Right now, only about 47% of Americans could cover a $1,000 emergency using savings. The median emergency fund has dropped to around $5,000, half of what people reported just a year earlier. So most people, when life happens, reach for a credit card charging 22%, and suddenly that $800 repair quietly becomes $1,300 by the time it's paid off. This is the destroyer that makes every other destroyer worse, because it's the amplifier. Without a cushion, every small setback gets funneled straight into high-interest debt, or something even scarier. People without emergency savings are 13 times more likely to raid their own retirement account just to get through the month. Nearly a third of people now carry more credit card debt than they have in savings. So Marcus's missing $1,000 in a savings account reaches all the way back through time and detonates the compounding we just fell in love with. One rough month, and he's paying penalties for the privilege of borrowing from his own future self. It's the 2 a.m. parking lot. It's checking your bank balance before buying groceries. It's hoping the dashboard light stays green for one more paycheck. I want to pause here and say something, because if you're recognizing yourself in 3 or 4 of these, I don't want you feeling foolish. You're not foolish, not even slightly. This system was never built to be survived on instinct alone, and nobody involved in any of these transactions has any incentive to teach you otherwise. The dealership profits from the long loan. The card company profits from the balance you carry. The app profits from the impulse. None of them earn a single dollar when you calmly build a boring emergency fund and invest the rest. So nobody ever bothered to teach you. That's exactly why we built a community where everyday people work through all 6 of these together, without anybody trying to sell them something flashy. The links are in the description if you'd like to join, because you were never meant to fight all of this alone, with no map and no allies. Which brings us to destroyer number 6, the sneakiest of them all, because it disguises itself as success, spending to appear wealthy, and its evil twin, trying to be too clever with the money you've actually invested. The appearing wealthy part is simple. Marketing stopped selling you products a long time ago and started selling you identities. The truck isn't a truck, it's a personality. The watch isn't a watch, it's a scoreboard. So people spend money they don't have on things they don't need, to impress people who genuinely aren't thinking about them at all. It's the most expensive game on the planet, and the grand prize for winning is that a few strangers you'll never actually meet briefly assume you're doing fine. Marcus's truck was never transportation. It was a billboard, and he was paying $770 a month to advertise a version of himself that didn't quite exist yet. But there's a subtler version that trips up even the disciplined people who dodged everything else. Once you finally start investing, you get this urge to be brilliant at it, to outsmart the whole system, bailing out when the news looks scary, jumping back in once it feels safe. And here's the brutally beautiful data on how that tends to go. Over the last 20 years, the market itself returned a little over 10% annually. The average actual investor in that same market earned only about 9.2%. They underperformed the very market they were invested in, purely by fidgeting with it. The real danger was never picking bad investments, it's picking perfectly good ones and panic selling at the worst possible moment because a headline spooked you. On $100,000 over 20 years, that fidgeting is the difference between roughly $700,000 and $580,000. You'd have paid $120,000 for the fleeting privilege of feeling clever on a random Tuesday. So let's zoom out. Lifestyle creep, the truck, the cards, the waiting, the missing safety net, and the ego. 6 destroyers, but notice they aren't really 6 separate problems. They're the same single problem wearing 6 different outfits. Every one of them takes your most valuable, most time-rich dollars, the exact ones you'll only ever have during your 20s and 30s, and quietly redirects them away from your future and towards somebody else's. That's the entire trick. It was never one giant catastrophe you could see coming from a mile away. It's 1,000 small, reasonable-feeling leaks, each one wearing a friendly face. And now, back to that truck. Remember Marcus in the parking lot at 2 a.m., swiping his card to fix a transmission? That's the same matte black truck he financed the month he turned 25, still costing him money 15 years later. Not just the repair itself, but every dollar that payment never got the chance to become. Elena drove something boring the entire time, and that's exactly why she could take the job she genuinely wanted for less money without even flinching. Same income as Marcus the whole way through. The only thing that ever separated the free one from the trapped one was which of these 6 they saw coming. So here's the one line I want you to actually hold on to. You don't get to decide whether the clock runs. It's running right now, for all of us. You only get to decide whether it's running for you or against you. That's the entire game. Avoiding these 6 isn't about being cheap or joyless, or eating plain rice in the dark for a decade. It's the opposite. Every one of these destroyers is a trade where you hand over a piece of your freedom for something that only looks like status. Dodging them buys that freedom back, one decision at a time. You're going to spend your 20s and 30s either way. And the only question is whether at 40 you're standing on solid ground, or standing at the bottom of a hole you spent 15 years decorating really, really nicely. So pick one of these 6 today, and start, because 10 years from now, you're going to do one of 2 things, quietly thank yourself, or wish so badly that you had.